this last session, we're going to focus on sustainability. So it's a topic that has come up from time to time during the earlier sessions. A few people have mentioned it as an important trend, but as yet we haven't really delved deeply into sustainability and what that means for manufacturing in the future. So we've assembled today a panel of people from the private sector, from regulators, from government, to really get to the nub of what sustainability is, what it actually means in practice, rather than just being a buzzword. Just before we begin, I'll bring up my panel shortly, but we first have a video from somebody who was unable to join us, which is from Karmenu Vella, who's the Commissioner for the Environment in the European Commission. So Europe has often been at the forefront of environmental policy making globally, so we thought we'd begin with a few words from him. So we'll just watch this short video, then I'll invite up the rest of the panel.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this invitation to address the summit, and my apologies for not appearing in person. The circular economy is a file that I follow very closely, so I am sorry that I cannot hear your views. I would like to use this opportunity to set out the priorities of the European Commission in this area in the hope that it can help steer the discussions. The first thing to note is Europe is looking to industry to lead a global transition to the circular economy. We need an approach where resources are used more efficiently for a longer time, and where waste becomes a valuable raw material. Europe is trying to accelerate this transition. A year ago, the European Commission adopted an action plan for the circular economy. It is a mix of hard and soft measures, legal proposals and nudges to help businesses and consumers move to a more circular approach. Our action plan tackles all steps of the life cycle and value chain. It contains over 50 proposals, from organic fertilizers and food waste to eco-design and waste to energy. It is an ongoing project, and later this year we will be adding new elements for water reuse and plastic waste. At the moment, less than a quarter of plastic waste is recycled and about half goes to landfill. A strategy for plastic waste will aim to change all that. It will be an example of how the circular economy ought to function. Our action plan is showing how policymakers can help, setting standards and providing incentives. We are also reinforcing research and innovation. In 2016 and this year, 2017, we will grant over 650 million euros to circular economy projects. That way, we demonstrate the economic and environmental feasibility of circular approaches in a wide range of activities. There are projects in process industries, in manufacturing, and there are new business models that are easy to emulate. We do this because we see that the potential benefits for businesses are enormous. Studies show circular economy approaches creating a net benefit of almost €1 trillion by the year 2030 compared to business as usual. And that would represent a 7% gain in Europe's GDP. In Europe, demand is already growing for new business activities such as recycling, upgrading, and remanufacturing. Consumer preferences are turning towards products that are durable, repairable, and do not become waste too soon. Companies in the transport and logistics sector are seeing old certainties questions as newer business models become more prominent. And financial institutions and banks are waking up to the change. They can see new value and are developing new competencies to assess companies and investments that take circularity into consideration. Looking ahead, I see global benefits for supply chains. The circular economy may reduce tensions over key resources as they will be used more efficiently. A win for the economy, for the environment and for the society shouldn't just be European objective. The benefits will be there for the global economy, providing businesses make it happen. Which brings me back to you. When businesses lead the way, society is sure to follow. I am sure you will be talking about those pathways today, and I look forward to the results of your discussions. Finally, my congratulations to the government of the United Arab Emirates and the Minister of Economy for organizing this first Global Manufacturing and Industrialization Summit in Abu Dhabi. And I wish it the best, the very best of luck. Thank you for your attention.
Right, so after that background from the European perspective, I'd like to call my panel up on stage, His Excellency Abdulla Al Maeeni, Director General from the Emirates Standardization and Metrology Authority, Jean Bennington Sweeney, the Chief Sustainability Officer from the big global industrial company 3M, Kevin McKinley, the Acting Secretary General from the International Standards Organization, whose logos you've probably seen on various products, and Alistair Nolan, Senior Policy Analyst from the OECD Directorate for Technology. Please come up to the stage and welcome our guests. Yeah, so Alistair, if you just take there, Jean, take this one. Right, so in this session we want to get into sustainability. Yep. So we've been talking a lot about different technologies and how the manufacturing industry is developing over the next 5, 10 years and beyond. And I think what we want to try and tease out for the next 20, 30 minutes is how can we make that sustainable and what's the current status and what needs to change. Your Excellency, if I can just begin with you. So the UAE sort of straddles an interesting place in the sustainability world. So it's an emerging market in the sense that it's a relatively new country and it's developed very, very fast. At the same time, it does have a wealth level and therefore maybe a responsibility level so equivalent to a European country. And many people would say that it's a bit strange for the UAE to talk about sustainability because its economy is built on what many would call an unsustainable product, right? So fossil fuels. What's your vision of where sustainability sits in the UAE, and do you think standards here are in fact up to the global standard, or is there still further to go?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Yes, in terms of UAE, as you mentioned, that we are looking after the sustainability, and our main, one of the main focus is sustainability in our all kind of projects and manufacturing, and even our policies which we are making in the government. Yes, we are using standards in terms of supporting our policies. We are using standards as a tool and enabler to implement our policies in terms of having sustainable environment, sustainable, let's say, workplace in the UAE. Our standards based on international standards, we are harmonized and we are adopting international standards, mainly ISO standard, and we have other international standards. We issued so many regulations, and we issued policies and some schemes to enable the sustainability in UAE. Of course, you talked about the oil, let's say, which is affecting somehow the sustainability. However, as a UAE, in terms of decision made by the government in past years and for future is we are concentrating in alternative energies that, let's say, green energy. If you see that UAE moved towards the solar energy, renewable energy, and we issued so many standards, so many regulations that's supporting that part. We are moving towards more clean energy cars, let's say, in terms of electrical cars charged by solar panels. So we have so many policies that supporting the vision of the government towards sustainability.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what's the current priority for sustainability in UAE? I mean, there are many different elements of sustainability. So we could think about renewable energy, we could think about water, we could think about waste. What's at the top of the agenda at the moment?
Actually, what we are doing is that we are working on different fields parallel. So we concentrated first on electrical energies, how to reduce the usage of electrical energy and energy produced by natural resources. Of course, for water, we have also our policy in terms of reduction of use of the water. Waste also, we are working with the local governments and the industry here to reduce the waste percentage or the amount of waste per person or per manufacturer in terms of, while we are producing our products or manufacturing in UAE. For example, in looking at the environment issues that we talked about the plastic and how we are recycling. We issued the first regulation in the region in terms of using standards for biodegradable plastics. So all the plastic products in UAE, it is must by law should be biodegradable in terms of the shopping bags or let's say wrapping bags and all kind of plastics. So we are working towards so many activities and different areas in terms of having sustainable environment and sustainable policies.
Okay. Actually, talking about plastics, interesting moment to bring you in, Jean. I once spoke at a 3M event in Singapore, one of your regional Asia-Pacific meetings, and was given a little gift bag, and the variety of products that 3M makes is amazing. I got a pair of kitchen scissors and some giant Post-it notes, and also a sticky tape dispenser. So there's, I think your products are probably more around us than we realize, and they don't always sort of have your brand in a prominent position on them. You've I guess seen have had a lot of exposure to different issues in sustainability in different parts of the supply chain and in different countries around the world. For 3M, why is sustainability important? And is it something that where you really look to governments to lead, or are there things that you do that are outside of the regulatory environment?
So first of all, thank you for having me here, but also say that sticky tape was Scotch tape, just so we're clear on what brand that was. Yes, we make a variety of products, as you pointed out. We make over 55,000 products around the world in 76 countries, over 100 manufacturing sites. So when we look at sustainability, we have to take a very holistic look at it, because with such a variety of materials that we use in different manufacturing environments, we have to make a decision for each one of what is material to that particular manufacturing side of those products that we're using and for the company. So we do have standard practices around how we manage waste, how we manage water. But if, for instance, a manufacturing site that might be in Australia, for instance, would have very different focus around water than one that might be in Hutchinson, Minnesota. But overall, our effort is to make sure that we're reducing our environmental impact in whatever forms of materials that we use, that we recycle as many materials as we can, that we reduce our waste, and that we properly handle that waste to meet government regulatory requirements so that we're responsibly disposing of that waste if it needs to be disposed of in whatever appropriate way. We're very focused with each of our manufacturing facilities. Our plant managers' performance is measured on there and determined by their performance in sustainability around waste reduction, water reduction, et cetera. And the reason why is because when we use fewer materials to make a product, we can have greater profitability and provide a better product, a more quality product to our customers. So it saves us money. Really the bottom line of sustainability in our manufacturing operations is our ability to save money and spend that money to make the products that we need to make for our customers, rather than throwing away materials that we can't use.
Right. So As an economist, I guess I'd normally think that, okay, now, companies have a particular niche or objective, and they're sort of there to, maximize their profits or shareholder value, and then operate within the sort of regulations and the business environment that is set up, I guess, primarily by governments. So for 3M, the reality is that in different countries around the world, there are different levels of standards.
That's right.
I live in Southeast Asia, so in Singapore. Now, Singapore has probably relatively robust environmental standards, but certainly the neighbouring countries around certainly do not, and standards there are much lower. So not making any comments on 3M's, operations per se, but I do observe that factories in those countries will adhere to lower standards. Now, as a multinational firm, what sort of action would you prefer from governments in countries like Malaysia or Indonesia? Do you prefer the lack of direction, and you can then implement your global standards, or would you prefer a more robust local approach?
I'll start by saying that we run our manufacturing sites around the world to the same global standards that are 3M standards. And if oftentimes those standards exceed the standards in the local country, sometimes the standards in the local environment might be actually higher, but we will meet whichever is higher. So for instance, when we started manufacturing in China, which was more than 40 years ago, we were meeting our global standards for performance, for waste, energy, everything that we did, human capital. So we maintain those same standards no matter where we operate, and we train our workforce to be able to operate, to be able to perform at that level. It's our expectation that every site we have around the world meets our global standards. Okay. And those standards are set at really at the most stringent level that they can be.
And why do you do that? Because I guess you don't need to, and it imposes extra cost on your business.
We do it primarily, one, because it's our reputation. We want to have the same quality of product all around the world, that no matter where it's made, it's the same quality of product. So our customers rely on our products to perform in the same way and to have been made in a responsible manner. So it doesn't matter where we're selling them, our customers' expectations of us are the same. So that's one, reputation, quality of product, but also just our license to operate in our communities. We're more likely to get top talent to come to work for us because they know they're going to be protected in the environment that they work in and are going to be safe. So it has many different both reputational and financial advantages for us.
Okay. It's a very good moment to bring you in, Kevin, from the International Standards Organization perspective. So, I mean, you sort of operate at a level above national governments, sort of trying to put together a series of standards, and sort of you aim to encourage companies unilaterally to take them up and for consumers to look out for them on products. What's your perspective on the current international landscape for sustainability and what trends we might see in the next 5 years?
Well, we've had a lot of leadership from government in the last couple of years. We've seen the governments come together under the UN to establish the Sustainable Development Goals, which are ambitious. 17 goals for governments, and this has been ratified in 2015, and fairly ambitious, and one that needs a partnership between governments and the private sector. So international standards are a perfect vehicle for that because they go across national borders, because they provide a voluntary approach to meet public policy objectives. So we're seeing great interest. Governments have pressure in their country to meet their signatory obligations. So that's governments then pushing their own constituencies to say, come on, companies, do the best you can in energy performance and water usage and in your treatment of staff and everything. So in every aspect, they need help. They need good approaches, good practices. And they just shouldn't invent it for themselves. They should use that are global good practices in the areas. And you see big companies like 3M taking up important standards like energy management, ISO 50000, a series of other standards that help them perform on a global basis consistently. So we're seeing the interest in one standard, a level playing field for all of the global markets on a voluntary basis being an elegant tool to bridge energy and interest from companies and the policy directions of the regulators. So we're seeing great interest to even have more standards that meet these. We're seeing standards on sustainable procurement, on anti-bribery, social responsibility, of course. These standards are supporting good practices in companies that can help them meet some of their own objectives and supporting public policy objectives.
So I mean, Jean, are the ISO standards something that comes into 3M's decision making? Is that, do you base your internal standards on those, or?
We follow ISO standards. So you mentioned ISO 50001 for energy management. We have a global program on ISO 50001 to, it's a way to get employee engagement. It's a way to teach our manufacturing facilities what's important about energy. It gives them a methodology to follow, to put programs in place, to put practices in place, to put metrics in place, and to really have a holistic look at energy and management in a facility. So that is one of many ISO standards that we use and find them to be very helpful to provide direction and focus.
Okay.
And I would say on the 50001, it's very interesting too. It's one of the standards that is, has immediate payback, because when you implement this kind of a standard, you're saving energy costs in a company, and the payback is within 1, 2, 3 years maximum. The investment you've made to improve your energy performance, to go around your plant, to turn off steam valves, change pumps, whatever it is that you're doing, is paid back very, very quickly. And so these types of standards are very popular right now because they're seeing bottom line impacts, sustainability impacts they're reaping the rewards of that. I don't think it's true that in all areas that's the case. Sometimes you're investing in sustainability for shareholder or stakeholder support, for reputation, so there sometimes is a long-term investment for the viability of the organization, but that's a standard there that has actually financial return very, very quickly. Okay.
Alistair, let's bring in the policy perspective here. So we've spent a bit of time talking about what companies are doing. I mean, something we haven't done yet, I don't know if you've got a 2 or 3 sentence definition of sustainability that you use at the OECD, but then also, I mean, based upon the research that you've done, I mean, of course, OECD is one of the leading sort of policy research institutes globally. Where do you think policy making is least developed and most in need of some attention?
Thank you. Definition of sustainability, well, there are many which we could adopt. The OECD doesn't have a single definition which it kind of sticks its logo to, but one could say development that pays for itself might be sustainability from one angle. Just on the policy issues, you know, we've been recently looking at a set of 5 technologies which are important to advanced manufacturing. And I wouldn't say I could point out countries or regions which are necessarily in leadership positions with respect to the environmental implications of all these technologies. I think that for a number of these technologies in advanced manufacturing, we're still trying to think through what governments need to do to best harness their potential environmental impacts. So I'll give you, I mean, maybe give you 2 examples. One in the area of 3D printing, which we've talked about 3D printing during these last few days, but not from an environmental standpoint. It's often held that 3D printing will be environmentally benign because you'll be able to avoid the transport-related externalities in transporting mass from place A to place B. You can just send the code and print out in place B. It's also a contention that there will be limited waste because it's additive rather than subtractive manufacturing. The work we've been doing on 3D printing shows that these are probably insignificant environmental implications. That 3D printing is neither environmentally benign nor environmentally negative. It depends on the type of printing process. It depends on a range of things that governments can do.
Why is that? Because I mean, I guess you know, we would all assume that it might have those kind of benefits. So what are we missing?
Well, one, for example, is that with many 3D printers, and of course there's a spectrum of 3D printer types, but with many types, the purity of the feedstock is so high, or has to be so high, that it essentially precludes recycling. And in many cases, the feedstock is toxic. So when you talk about democratization of production, well, you don't want many amateur industrialists handling toxic materials necessarily. But we think there are potentially many positive environmental impacts of 3D printing, coming from the fact that so far, for many shapes that are manufactured, it's only plastics that can be used to date to make those shapes. So the potential exists now to use 3D printing with more bio-friendly materials to make those same shapes. But there's a range of things that governments can do in this area. One would be to develop a system of voluntary standards around the environmental sustainability of 3D printer types, because there are many dimensions of sustainability with 3D printing. A second would be to target public research on issues of the nature of the feedstock which is used. And a third thing, which is almost never mentioned and I think is really fascinating, is that many of our white goods, let's say our washing machines or so on, we put them into the waste stream when a single component, a single part breaks, but that washing machine is no longer manufactured. Imagine you could have a universal online database of spare parts which you could then print out. Now, this is already being trialed in a few countries, in Finland, for example, but there are intellectual property issues to resolve there. So governments can play a role in helping create an enabling environment in terms of IP there and bring about an unexpected environmental impact from 3D printing. Another example, if I may, if I have one more moment, and this has not been raised during I think really during the event so far, but in our work on advanced manufacturing, it's clear that supercomputing is of ever-increasing importance and criticality in a whole range of industries. So Airbus, for example, owns 3 supercomputers, which are in the top 500 supercomputers globally. These are essential for designing products, in this case aircraft, which are more environmentally friendly, for the design of buildings which are more environmentally friendly. Buildings in the United States account for 40% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the US. If you could increase building efficiency by 50%, that would be the equivalent of removing all passenger vehicles and small trucks from roads in the US. So supercomputing is really important, but supercomputing itself is immensely energy consuming. The largest supercomputer in the world that's in China, the Tianhe 2, consumes $100,000 of electricity per hour. In Kobe, in Japan, the university supercomputer consumes 1/3 of all electricity consumption in that city. So this is also an area where basic research around the efficiency of energy use in supercomputers is important.
And the other third of electricity in Kobe, I think, is used by the electronic toilets in Japanese households. I'm just going to bring in the audience in a minute, so if you want to, those of you who are here to hear the session on sustainability, I'll be coming out to get your questions or comments for the panel, so please do get your thinking caps on for questions. But just one thing I want to throw open to the whole panel beforehand is looking at the I in GMIS, which is industrialisation. So we've been thinking a lot about the industrialisation process for countries, right, and how that can help countries develop up the income ladder and provide better quality of life for citizens, and how industrial change will go ahead. If you are either, say maybe from, say, Jean's perspective, a company from an emerging market going global, so we're seeing a lot of, say, for example, Chinese companies going global, but it's not just from China, an emerging market company going global for the first time, or an emerging market government wanting to industrialize and increase manufacturing, but wanting to do it in a sustainable way. What are the priorities? What are the 1 or 2 things that you need to think about today? Who would like to start us off?
I will.
Yeah.
I've touched on this a little bit before, but I think that any facility that's starting up really has to look at the materials that they will be using and understand the source of those materials and what is most important to them to be able to use. So, and also the environment that they're working in. For instance, we have a manufacturing facility in Brazil that is in an area that is very water scarce and water stressed outside of Sao Paulo. And of course, so their focus has been really on being able to reuse and recycle water because there isn't enough fresh water available. So they've developed a whole system where they purify and clean water just to be able to reuse it within the manufacturing facility. So it's very much a sustainability issue, but that would not be the same issue in in a manufacturing plant in Minnesota because there's a much higher level of water availability. So in some areas of the world, energy is the concern, availability of energy, or in some areas of the world, availability of skilled resources, people with the right education, people with the right technical skills to be able to run our equipment and to be able to run the manufacturing operation and provide a quality product. So my point is that it's not the same everywhere. Each location, every part of the world and every industry that you're in, we need to look at what the constraints are and how to overcome those constraints in the most sustainable way.
Okay. And any comments from a regulatory or public sector perspective?
I think what we are doing in UAE is that we're encouraging our manufacturers to comply with international standards, since those standards are already agreed between many countries around the world. So those standards will enable them to enter any market because they are implementing what countries agreed on technically. In terms of, we are talking about the ISO 50000 standards for the energy management. It is agreed standard. So once I'm moving to, let's say, US, and I'm talking that my manufacturer is implementing the standard, then they will accept what I'm doing. Even for the products and for all my practices is that if I'm following the international standard, then there will be acceptance from the different parts of the world on what I'm doing in terms of activities.
Okay. I'll just see, we can come back to it, but I'll just see if there's any audience questions for the moment. Anybody from the audience want to come in and give us a direction for discussion? Yeah, halfway up.
Thank you. Martin Chilcott from 2 Degrees. The Business and Sustainable Development Commission recently put a 12 trillion figure on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, of which I think about just over 2 trillion is associated with manufacturing directly, and of that a significant part is to do with the circular economy. I wonder what the panel's view would be on the positive but necessarily disruptive nature of the circular economy in manufacturing supply chains, and in particular how they think it might be affecting an increasing localization of production and reproduction. Because of course one of the factors in the circular economy is you don't want to be moving reused goods or repurposed goods or recycled materials long distances.
Any thoughts on that from the panel? Who'd like to jump in?
Well,
yep.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer. I mean, we've been doing a lot of work on industrial biotechnology, which has maybe 2 legs. One is the high-tech area of, say, synthetic biology, where you're looking at rewriting genetic code such that microorganisms will produce chemicals, fuels, other products of interest. And I don't see that as necessarily having a geographic component, but there's another leg which is to do with the operation of integrated biorefineries, where, of course, there have been many initiatives around the world for a long time to produce biofuels, but some of our work is showing that we could get a lot bigger impact in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions if you focus on bio-based chemicals and materials and not just the fuels. And we need many more integrated biorefineries across the US, across Europe than actually exist. And because those biorefineries are using a variety of sources of biomass, from crops to plastic bag, municipal waste, etc., there will certainly be a geographic component there. And we do see that there is a clustering effect in these biorefineries that exist in Europe. So exactly how that will play out over time, I'm not sure. There is definitely a geographic dimension, though.
Okay. Jane? Yeah.
I would add to that I think the circular economy is really creating tremendous advantage for innovation. We see these tough problems as being places where we can bring our innovation to solve those challenges and create new things that no one has in mind today. So we see it as a tremendous business advantage to be able to help our customers solve their most difficult sustainability challenges by bringing 3M innovation to those challenges. So we welcome that.
And I think in the standards world, you're seeing it being addressed head-on with sustainable procurement and the considerations of a new type of value chain that has local and international aspects. So that's directly addressed, but I think it's lacking in other product standards and other specifications that need to have that extra consideration of a circular economy, of new types of usage, of reuse and recycle that has not been previously explicitly considered. So we're going to see, I think, in our work program a revision, as we have done with sustainability in the past, and I think this more sophisticated, even more thought-provoking and challenging circular economy discussion, Industrial 4.0 discussion has to make its way into the policies of standard setting as well. And it's making its way head-on in some standards, but others in the product and areas need to pick up. I would say as well, the service economy is also an area that is of great interest for standardization, because it's a big part of every economy. So manufacturing will be challenged, if you will, by the service economy as well, and that's also the evolution of manufacturing itself. So we're developing more and more service-related standards that are talking about quality of service and expectations related to competencies and service offerings. So that's another development.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Let's see if I could see any hands up. So let's just continue on stage. So Jean, I'm just wondering, 3M has a Chief Sustainability Officer, so I guess that implies that the company has a wide range commitment to sustainability. Was it a difficult process to get cross-company acceptance for sustainability goals when, I guess, they could sometimes conflict with other people's short-term imperatives, say such as cost saving or meeting manufacturing deadlines?
For 3M, we've been having sustainability goals long before we ever put the word sustainability on it. Mm-hmm. Back in the mid-1970s in the US, when the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act came into being, we had a very forward-thinking vice president of environmental engineering who believed that by reducing waste, we can save money. Mm-hmm. And he started a program for the company that we still use today called Pollution Prevention Pays. We commonly call it 3P. Mm-hmm. And with that is the firm thinking that by reducing our waste, reducing our impact, that we can save money. And so that was really the beginning of our sustainability practice. And when I came into the role and started developing more towards sustainability for the company, and the word sustainability was being used, then people go, well, how is that different from what we've already been doing? Because we've been focusing on that through our 3P, Pollution Prevention Pays programs. And I said, it's no different. That's what sustainability is, and even more broadly than that. So it was actually an easy acceptance, because once we connected the word sustainability to what we were already doing in pollution prevention, people go, oh, well, we've been doing that a long time. So that, for our company, the transition into thinking about sustainability has been a fairly easy one. Mm-hmm. More the challenge has been to think more holistically about sustainability, that it's not just about waste and water reduction or energy efficiency. It also includes health and safety of our employees. It includes development of our employees and diversity, including diversity. So it's much broader than what we normally think as part of sustainability in our operations.
Okay. Alistair, on the topic of broadening the definition of sustainability and thinking about the balance between private and public sector action, I think there are some elements of the topic that can get a bit forgotten. And one of those is ecosystems, which it's quite difficult for an individual company or individual manufacturing plant to take responsibility for something as broad as ecosystems. And ecosystems are under very high pressure internationally and are actually the root cause of a lot of environmental problems. What do you think can be done to improve the state of ecosystems from a policy perspective? What are the most effective policies? Is it just old-fashioned wall off areas and protect them from activity, or are there other policy matters that are in vogue?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an environmental economist. I would hesitate to say what should be done for it. There's different types of ecosystems, of course, in different environments. I would say that Generally speaking, of course, we want with manufacturing that it pays the cost of its externalities, whether it's carbon emissions or other wastes like non-product output which has environmental damage. The company should internalize those externalities. That's a kind of a general overarching framework condition. But beyond that, I think governments need to be creating, amongst other things, environments which are stable, which allow the private sector to make long-term investments. Some of these technologies are quite risky. I mentioned the biorefineries, for example. Some of these integrated biorefineries run to hundreds of millions of dollars. So you see in the United States, the US Department of Agriculture extending loan guarantees to $100 million to the private sector, de-risking long-term private sector investment in technologies which are large, risky, in some cases unproven. So there's many things which governments can be doing. You mentioned earlier the question of if you are an emerging economy, what would you do in this area? And I think one thing I would certainly do is make sure that there's no impression of laxity from the policy standpoint. We see time and again a convergence between competitiveness and environmental performance. Just take the idea of zero defect factories. There was a study commissioned recently for the European Commission showing for the top 100 manufacturers in Europe, if you get down to zero defect manufacturing, they save 160 billion euros a year. So there's the convergence between the two objectives, commercial, environmental.
Yeah. Okay, we have run out of time for the session. Thank you very much for pushing through with us to the end, and thanks very much to my panel, His Excellency Abdulla Al Maeeni, Jean Bennington Sweeney from 3M, Kevin McKinley from the ISO, and Alistair Nolan from the OECD. Please join me in thanking them.